Okay, in that last video, I was talking about being aware of colors when we're out in public, starting with the color yellow, because the yellow they say primary colors. Yellow might actually be the primary color in modern reality to start with as a form of training. So, the greatest of accomplishments can be achieved by discipline. I think the greatest of discipline in all discipline is a function of disciplining awareness, that is attention. That can amount to attitude, which would amount to stance, which can amount to what we can undergo and undertake and understand is a function of stance and attitude. But that's still a function of awareness. And so discipline within awareness would be a key. And one place, but you still yet need somewhere to start with anything. A journey of 1,000 miles, it starts with one step, but yet it's impossible without the first step. So I would say maybe a first step would be just appreciating the color yellow, because it normally, if of all the colors, I think that yellow is it's the most pragmatic. That means it usually has a reason when you see yellow, such as a yellow school bus or a yellow warning sign or yellow signs on a pavement. Usually, if there had been one color that has a reason, it would be yellow. Yet yellow is not the only color that has a reason. So you start appreciating yellow, then you become more conscious of other colors. And if you think about the reason they're being employed, is that being employed for an artistic use, for a commercial use, or for a pedestrian use? What was that color employed for? Or what was it? Was someone trying to impress someone when they put that color? Was it trying to attract attention? Was it trying to or was it trying to conceal attention? That would be interesting. A color, if any color was trying to conceal something, I would imagine green or maybe brown, such as camouflage. That would be an example of, so you see a person with camouflage, now that color has been employed for a specific reason to conceal something. That might be more profound even than yellow, because of most colors, at least in general society, are not trying to conceal something. Like, yes, in a military theater, in a war zone, you could see more things trying to conceal something. Some people would say that modern society is in fact a war zone, but it's not presented as a war zone. So a lot of things at least wouldn't outright have the function of concealment, though they can. But that would be very interesting. What is actually a color that is trying to conceal something in an environment? That would be very profound. But just by starting with yellow, you can appreciate other things. Another exercise would be like, so you're in a place, right? And everyone's trying to read everyone's mind all the time in a social venue. That's actually what's so kind of, I was telling some people, like, sometimes in high school, it's kind of like, in high school, like, we're studying each other and our attractive counterparts in high school closer than scientists, and we're observing each other's development and social conduct closer than scientists in high school. Yet, where does everyone in broad society get their training and education and formative experiences? In high school, K through 12. So you could say in broad society, you're still in high school, even though you get to make choices and you get to vote and do different stuff. You're still in high school because everyone there was trained in high school and is still living out their training to different degrees, conscious and unconscious. But in high school, people watch each other's closer than scientists, especially physically, as far as choices in clothing. But also especially choices in speech and even your awareness. People are aware of what other people are aware of in high school, obviously, but even in broad society. But as you're in a public place and people are wondering what the heck is going through your mind, and we largely don't know what's going on in another person's mind, but sometimes we can sense it. I would say maybe the more confident or the more self-absorbed people are, the more difficult they are to decipher. That might actually be why people are leaning towards more and more of being self-centered as being an advantage in modern society, because you are a little bit more difficult to decipher, and that would give you amount of leverage and therefore power. And all people are concerned with power, generally speaking, and also attracted to power, generally speaking. So that would seem to speak to some of our current values in terms of being taciturn, that's speaking less, and also being self-centered as an actual cultural value and aesthetic currently to my taste. But as people are wondering what's going through your mind, and you're not trying to show what's going on in your mind, or you're trying to have something interesting going through your mind, sometimes you start trying to think about interesting things when you're trying to be cool. Just start appreciating the color yellow. As people are wondering what the heck you're thinking, what's yellow right now? Where's something yellow? That's just a way of training yourself outside of your normal habits. That could be a strength if you get in the habit of breaking habit. Maybe the strongest habit is to break habits. How strong of a person would you be as a person who can consciously break habits? Yet, what habit can you break outside of discipline? And what discipline have you outside of discipline of awareness? So you could start with the color yellow. Then as you become appreciate the color yellow, start training your peripheral awareness. As I'm focusing on yellow, how many things can I look for that are yellow in my peripheral vision? As I'm focusing something in my central vision with yellow, that would start to train and alter your attention in that moment. Then as you do that, you reason upon that as to how and where something is yellow and the reason for something being employed as yellow, you become aware of other colors, and then you start to get in you start to learn to appreciate the reason for another color, even the reason that nature would make something a certain color, because colors are still significant in nature. Even among plants and animals, colors are very significant and have meaning. You could maybe say that no color doesn't have meaning. You could say that any color, even if it's been artistic, architecture, natural. I think natural can be. You could say anything man-made is still natural, because mankind is from nature. But you could really say that there's no color without a reason, either a physical reason, a chemical reason, or a social, or there's always a reason for color. But what I wanted to say is that now you start thinking like that, and you're changing your awareness. But if you want to go even deeper than that, imagine if you so sometimes teachers say the exact wrong thing. I can remember times where I had teachers that were very skilled and versed on subjects, and they said the exact wrong thing. So the author Arthur Avalon said that a person who is learned in sound, now he was talking before some of our technology, but they still did have a lot of technology then, and some of the understanding that would amount to our technology then hasn't entirely changed. Some of the things he said about electricity then are more profound than I've seen in books now. But he said that a person who is learned in sound is a very significant person. That's a very high degree of skill and understanding if you are learned in sound. But you don't necessarily have to go to audio school or audio engineering training to appreciate sound, to understand sound. And I think that the highest form of understanding something is just simply to appreciate it. Enjoyment might be the highest form of appreciation. So if you can enjoy something, you understand something of something if you can enjoy it. So one thing, you don't have to necessarily be like fancy about like the dynamics of sound or the mechanics of sound, although you can get there. But one thing would just be to appreciate and receive sound, and take and lend yourself and act and engage the sounds that are being presented to you. So if you can, one way to do that is imagine that. Another thing that the real social dynamics that I was talking about discipline would talk about in the past was something called RES. That's reticular activation system. That is that your mind, both your conscious and subconscious, but one could actually say that your conscious is a byproduct of your subconscious, and nothing occurs to or is experienced as conscious until it had already been ascertained, apprehended, and presented through the subconscious mind. So you could almost say that all of life is unconscious, even and including and especially consciousness. But part of that is that your experience, what you've experienced before, what you've been interested in before, what you thought of before, what you feared before, it has to do with what you actually pick out of an environment, the details you notice in an environment. I'm outside right now at night, and I think that I know what's in front of my face, but I actually don't know all the things that's in front of my face, and I don't know all the way that my sound is being conveyed and what is aware of me. I don't actually know that even as clear as I think I have an appreciation of what's in front of me. So that's an appreciation of blind spot. A professional driver, one of the things that it doesn't take a lot of all kinds of things to make a person professional, but it takes very specific things that make a person professional. One of them is an awareness of blind spot. An awareness of the limitation of awareness is part of a professional driver in the greatest sense. And a clear example of that is to train the blind spot. I had a family member now that I trained to be a driver since last summer. And that driver is now, they're a very strong driver now after I spent some time with them. But when I first talked to them, they had no appreciation of their blind spot. And I was training them to look over, they'd be like, making a left turn and then going into the right lane from the left lane, because you're supposed to turn to the corresponding, and then you ease over to the right. But I was training them, as you do that, as you know you're alone, you still look over your shoulder, because as certain as you are that you're not alone, you can as easily have someone right there with you. So you need to train your head to go over your shoulder, even as you have no reason to look over your shoulder. And he at first he thought that was asinine, but then he came to appreciate as he had some close calls. But that's actually a high degree of training in awareness and discipline, is to be aware of the limitations of our awareness. So one thing is, if you can imagine that, is as sure as you are of what's in front of your face, imagine you had those movie theater goggles on, where you know that what's in front of the screen is different than as it appears through the goggles. The goggles enhance it there, but imagine you had limiting goggles, and therefore lean into your hearing as though your hearing is picking up things that are not being presented to your eyes, even as sure as you are is what's in your eyes, and you can hear deeply like that.